Bonjour, 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 salut tout le monde. C'est moi Charlotte, et oui, j'ai mal à la gorge, j'ai un peu mal. Voilà, donc aujourd'hui on va changer les questions de la forme vous, et on va les mettre en la forme tu, d'accord? So guys, hello. Yeah, I know. Je le sais. J'ai la voix un peu rappeuse. I know I have a little bit of a raspy, gravelly, husky, hoarse, some might say sexy voice. No. Ça fait un peu mal, It does hurt a little bit. But ça va aller, oui? It's going to be okay. I have a bad throat today, but what do we expect? C'est pas du Covid, hein? Attention, c'est pas du Covid. J'ai fait un test. So I know it's not COVID, I've done a test. Ça va, it's just a cold or the flu or whatever. Ça fait un peu mal. Anyway, moaning aside, today we're going to be changing questions from the vous form to the tu form in French. So later today, all my French club members will receive a document that looks like this. It'll be in digital PDF form, and what will happen is you'll be able to ideally go through the document on its own without watching the video first. Try making the changes yourself to see if you're able to do it. Then go watch the tutorial. You might want to just do it as you watch the tutorial and stop it. Because in this tutorial I'm going to look at the 18 questions that are on the document, and we're going to change them from the vous form to the tu form. So going from the polite form of address, vous, parlez-vous anglais, parlez-vous espagnol, parlez-vous allemand, par exemple, to parles-tu anglais, parles-tu allemand, parles-tu blah blah blah, etc. So it's not just the verb that changes in this. There might be other elements of the question that change, like little pronouns or reflexive pronouns or other bits, okay, as you'll see. But the main thing is that you understand, this is kind of the main thing. When you learn French, I, for one, will advise my students, because they're mostly adults, to learn the vous form of verbs alongside, but kind of over the tu form, because it's always nice to be polite. In French, there exists this vous form where you use a polite form of address, different verb conjugations, basically different pronouns and other little parts of language, which shows someone that you're addressing them formally or politely, courteously. Then there's the informal tu form, which is not disrespectful as such, but you use it with people that you know, with whom you're familiar, like your family, your children, maybe some colleagues, depending on your work environment, neighbours, that kind of thing. So the tu form that we're going to change these questions into will be for people that you know generally, or people who are the same kind of age. The questions you're going to see that are already written in the vous form will be for suitable for either someone that you don't know, to whom you're asking a question politely, or the useful thing about the vous form is that it also functions for when you're addressing any number of people. So you might be addressing a crowd in a lecture, a lot of students. You might have a senior position to them, but you're addressing them in the vous form because there's lots of them. You guys, all of you. Or you might be addressing people who are greatly senior to you in age or in status, or in the work status, for example. It could be a barrister or a judge or a doctor even. But if you're addressing a group of people, vous is the form of address that you'll need. So we're going from vous to tu. So from formal or plural to singular informal. I hope that's clear. Any questions, just like leave them below in the comments and I'll try and get back to you on them. For now, let's get on to it. So, what are the questions that we've got? We've got, okay, so some of these questions you might think, you wouldn't ask that to, someone that you haven't met before, or someone that you might think that some of these questions you wouldn't ask, but actually it's more about changing from vous to tu, knowing how to do that, and also knowing how to structure questions, okay? These are mostly in the present tense, I think. There might be a few present conditional. There are some that have like verb, subject, pronoun, and verb inversion. So instead of saying, for example, vous venez d'où, which means where are you from where do you come, with the subject pronoun vous first, you might get some questions in this list which have the verb first and then the subject pronoun. So you could, for example, ask this question, vous venez d'où? You could say venez-vous. Hang on a sec. You could say d'où venez-vous? Okay, so you're going to see a few different ways that you can ask questions in French. There's not just one way. There's often several ways that you can do it, okay? So you'll see a mixture of those here. Let's get on with it and see how we go. So the first one, and again, excuse me for my la maladie, the illness, whatever it is causing me to sound really croaky. So we might need to zoom in a little bit. Also, I notice it doesn't matter what makeup I put on, I still have this kind of ill look to me. So I am aware of that. Excusez-moi, mes amis, excusez-moi. So, vous venez d'où? From where do you come? So the main thing in this, vous is the subject pronoun. That has to change if you want to put it in the tu form. It has to be tu instead of vous. And then venez is from the verb venir. That is quite an irregular verb. It changes to vient. Tu viens. Tu viens d'où? Tu viens d'où? De and ou together is a contracted version of de and ou. D'où? Tu viens de où? Where do you come from? From where come you? If you like. Tu viens d'où? So I'm not going to invert that subject pronoun and the verb. I'm just going to change the subject pronoun here to the tu form and the verb to the tu form. That's from the verb venir. You can barely see that, can't you? Let's just zoom in a wee bit. So that's from the verb venir. Venir. To come. Okay, look that verb up. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. So, vous changes to tu, and venez, the ez ending, changes to vient. You need to know that verb. For example, the answer could be je viens de l'Angleterre, je viens d'Italie, je viens des États-Unis, come from the States, etc. I come from, I come of, if you like. De is, or the D apostrophe is short for de, which means of or from in English. Okay, here we have a similar question. Vous êtes d'où? So this de où means from where. Okay, so what's the difference here with these two questions? They kind of mean the same thing, but here we have the verb venir, to come from, and here we have the verb être, to be. So this here means where are you from? And you would answer I am from wherever. And this one here is I come from. Okay, so it means the same thing. It's all about provenance, if you like. But this is from the verb être. One of the two auxiliary verbs in French. That means you need them when you're forming compound tenses. So if you say, for example, I went, you need the verb être. Je suis allé. It's as if you're saying I am went. I am went. So you need that verb, and you also need avoir, to have. To have and to be, the two auxiliary verbs in French. Vous êtes d'où changes to, as above, the subject pronoun vous changes to tu. So we're going from the formal to the formal singular or plural to the informal singular, tu. So être becomes être, that's the vous form, you are. In the tu form, it's tu es. Je suis, tu es, il, elle, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils, elles sont. So when you get verb conjugations, if you look that verb être up, look up on wordreference.com for example, type in être, French to English or English to French, French to English, and then go on to click on that verb in one of the listings, and it should give you the conjugations. And in the present tense it'll say je suis, tu es, il, elle, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes. Okay? So that's what I'm writing the verb there for. Vous habitez où? Okay, so all these first three, 1, 2, 3, have this où. Like interrogative, what's that, pronoun or something? Adjective. It's an interrogative, it's asking where. So, in English you'd say, where do you live? You put the question word at the front, then you put the subject pronoun you, where do you, and then you put the verb at the end, live. You can't play around too much with that in English unless you're being poetic or whatever. Where live you? Live you where, for example? It's got this structure that's quite firm. Where do you live? But in French there's a few ways of asking, but you'll notice it's different from English. So the où bit goes at the end of the question. The you bit comes before and the verb is in the middle. So in this question we've got où, again, you know it's a where question. Where, habiter is the vous form of the verb habiter. That means to live or inhabit, and it's vous is at the beginning. So that changes to, now that habite is just, if you were to take off the EZ, that would leave you with the stem of the verb, habite. If you add an E to that, or an ES, then you've got the first three conjugations of an ER verb. J'habite, tu habites, il, elle, on habite. The first three present tense conjugations, I, you, he, she, one, if you like, in French, for ER verbs like habiter, manger, parler, regarder, écouter, they all sound the same. So, as it happens in the written form, there's an S at the end of the tu verb in the present tense. So, tu habites où? Where do you live? You live where? That's just one way of asking that question. You could invert the verb and the subject pronoun. Où habites-tu? If you do that, then the question word comes first. Où habites-tu? Où es-tu? D'où viens-tu? For example. But we're not going to look at that today. I mean, like, maybe I should do a video on changing questions to the subject-verb inversion. If I haven't done that already, that's a good one to do. Do that in the future. So here we have vous faites quoi comme travail? So, you do what as work? What do you do for work? It's a weird question to an English native speaker, but this is quite a common way of asking someone, what's your work? What line of work are you in? Vous faites quoi comme travail? So, comme can mean like or as. In this case, it would translate into English as work. Le travail is work. Vous, you might have emploi as well, which means job. What do you do as a job? But this is more common, I think. So, again, vous changes to tu. Faites, which is the vous form of the verb faire, to do. That's tu fais. Tu fais quoi? Tu fais quoi comme travail? So vous faites quoi becomes tu fais quoi. Okay? I've just realised up here I haven't put the verb habiter in. So we've got the verb venir, être, habiter, et faire. Always worth checking that you're familiar with verbs. And if you don't know conjugations in the present tense, go check them out. Make a list, go and find a conjugation tool like Word Reference or get a conjugation book. Got an Italian version here, but they look kind of similar. Conjugations look like that, different tenses. Ok. Vous êtes marié. Oh, that's a personal question, that. Are you married? You might not ask these kind of things. You may never have to, but this is really just to do with like the structure, the process of changing from vous to tu, and identifying bits of the language, knowing how they work, because you can substitute bits of the language like the verb or the adjective or the subject pronoun to get better at using the language, okay, to become more proficient. So, are you married? You are married becomes tu. So there's the verb être, which we changed to est. Tu es marié stays the same. If you're asking someone in like a text, you never know, or an email in writing, and you're asking a lady, you would add an extra e onto marié because adjectives agree in gender and number with whoever you're asking. If I were to ask a group of guys, lots of guys, are you guys married? Then I would use marié with an S at the end. If it was a group of girls, it would be marié with the extra e and an S to make it feminine and plural. That's a bit confusing, but in the tu form, you're only asking one person, so there'll never be an S at the end if it's correct. There'll either be one E with an accent, or an E with an accent and an extra E to make it feminine. Tu es marié. So it'll be tu es marié, comme ça, for a boy, or comme ça, for a fille. for a fille. Pour une fille, for a girl. Ok, vous avez quel âge? Vous avez quel âge? We do have the verb avoir. So I'm just going to write the verb there. Être, that means to be. Here, remember that's one auxiliary verb. You need that. You need to know how to say I am, you are, he is, she is, we are, you guys are, they are. But you also need to know avoir, which is to have, or to have got. I've got. J'ai un frère. J'ai deux stylos, par exemple. To have or to have got. So, vous avez quel âge? Well, the quel âge is the what age or which age bit. So, how old are you is translated as which age do you have? Vous avez changes to tu as. Okay, so if nothing else, if you're not familiar like with être and avoir in the present tense, go and check those conjugations out. Okay, if you're familiar with those, have a look at venir and faire, they're irregular verbs, and then have a look at the verb habiter because it's a useful one. It's an ER verb. Let's look at the next set of questions. I hope this is all kind of clear, guys. I know I ramble a little bit, but hopefully this video is useful for those of you who are watching. Okay, so, vous êtes français ou française? So where there's an extra E in a bracket, that means if you're addressing a female, you need to add an extra E to the adjective in the question. Often the case. Unless the adjective already ends with an E. excuse me, I can't think of an example there. So, vous becomes tu, and elle becomes et, français, française stays the same. The thing there that changes is if, for example, I'm asking a girl, are you French? Then I would need to be wary that français is the adjective that describes a French guy. Française, français, française, français, française. Putting the extra E on the end changes the pronunciation as well as the written form. Okay? Tu es français? Oui, je suis français. Oui, je suis française. Okay, so you can see wherever there's a vous êtes in the plural or the polite form, it becomes tu es in the singular form. Tu es étudiant. Tu es étudiante. Étudiant, étudiante. Français, française. So the adjective can have an extra E on it depending on the gender of the person you're addressing. However, the main thing here is that the verb is être, to be. Vous êtes becomes tu es in the to form. Okay, here, this is quite useful. Savez-vous? That means do you know? Know you what time it is? Do you know what time it is? So this is the vous form, and here we have the verb then, the subject pronoun. Here we've got subject pronoun verb. You are a student. You are French. But here, instead of saying you are or do you know, it says know you. That's a very common way and a very, like instantly if you hear savez-vous, êtes-vous, allez-vous, avez-vous, parlez-vous, if you hear the verb then the subject pronoun, you know instantly someone's asking you a question. Okay? Savez-vous is from the verb savoir. This means to know or to be aware of. There's two verbs which can be translated into English as to know. Connaître et savoir. This one is not always, but often followed by a question word like quelle. Do you know what time it is? Do you know where to find something? Do you know who that is? Do you know why that car's parked there? So if you're asking a do you know plus a question word, do you know what? Do you know why? Do you know how? Do you know who? Do you know anything else? It's going to be savoir. So savez-vous becomes c'est. That's the to form of savoir. And then you keep the hyphen, and then you change vous to tu. Sais-tu quelle heure il est? So both of those mean do you know. That's the plural one, or the formal singular. That's the informal singular. Okay? Savez-vous becomes sais-tu. Okay. Here we have another one like voulez-vous. You might know a couple of famous songs with voulez-vous. Voulez-vous? There's an ABBA one. Or there's, I can't remember what the other one is. Patti LaBelle, is it? Voulez-vous coucher avec moi? That one. So if that was in the informal, that would be veux-tu. Veux, with an X. Veux-tu. So that's from the verb vouloir. Very useful, very irregular, modal verb. That verb can be followed by an infinitive verb, as is the case here. So here we've got do you want? Voulez-vous danser? That's why in the song Voulez-vous coucher avec moi? Coucher is the sleep bit, to sleep. Here we've got to dance. Do you want to dance? Okay. Voulez-vous manger quelque chose? Voulez-vous boire quelque chose? Voulez-vous aller à la plage? Do you want to go? So modal verbs, super useful. Vouloir is one of them. Go and check out the conjugations in the present tense. Changing voulez-vous, which is the subject pronoun verb inversion thing. That's one way of asking a question. You can do it with any subject pronoun, basically. So instead of having vous here, we've got tu, and instead of voulez, which is the vous form of vouloir, we've got veux-tu, which is the tu form of vouloir. Veux-tu danser? Eh, salut! Veux-tu danser? Oui? Allez! Okay. I don't know if people can even ask each other to dance these days. Who knows, what with COVID stuff. Okay, let's look at this. Vous allez souvent à Paris. So what we have here is a question. Whoa, what's going on there? Qu'est-ce qui se passe là? Voilà. On y va. So here we've got like a kind of statement structure. So you are going often to Paris. That kind of means in English, do you go often to Paris? Right? If you wanted to, you could change that to allez-vous, like up here. Instead of having vous at the beginning, you could put the verb before it and have like a little hyphen. Then it sounds instantly like a question. Allez-vous souvent à Paris? But here in this example, I've just got vous allez souvent à Paris. Vous allez souvent à Paris. Do you often go to Paris? So here it's the statement kind of form, but it's got a question mark at the end, so you use your intonation to bring it up. That's how it sounds like a question. Vous allez souvent à Paris? Oui? Ah, d'accord. So here we're going to change that to tu, and here we've got the verb aller. Allez, allez les bleus! Come on, you blues! That means to go, and it's really common. Just like vouloir and être and avoir, go and check out the verb aller. It's so useful, but it's very irregular. So the tu form is actually tu vas souvent. Tu vas souvent. Oui, je vais souvent à Paris, en fait. Je vais, tu vas, il, elle, on va. Nous allons, vous allez, il, elle, vont. Very irregular. So some of the conjugations start with a V. Some of them start with an A. Ok, connaissez-vous Rome? Rome, ok. Oui, je connais un peu Rome. Je connais un peu. Haven't been there for a while to Rome. Goodness me, ça fait des années en fait. Yeah, it's been years. So, connaissez-vous? So here we have the verb connaître. 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 So this is the other verb which also means to know. We have savoir et connaître. Don't worry too much if you're not sure when you use which. It is confusing. But remember, savoir you use with a question which. Do you know when? Do you know who? Do you know how? Etc. Connaître is to do with like awareness or knowledge of something. It's hard to get across when there isn't a difference, like a distinct difference in English. The verb to know is to know. But connaissez-vous Rome? That means like, are you familiar with Rome? As in, have you been there? Ideally, have you been there? Or, you know, do you know a lot about it if you haven't been there? But connaissez-vous Rome kind of is asking, do you have first-hand experience of the place? Okay. If I said, do you know the band the Rolling Stones? Connaissez-vous les Rolling Stones or the Rolling Stones? Then it would be like, are you familiar with? Have you heard of? If you like. Okay? Awesome. So, connaissez-vous? There you got that subject verb inversion. You got the EZ, E ending at the end of the verb, and that's the vous form. You'd have to know that that is connaît in the tu form, put the hyphen, then the subject pronoun, and then you've got the tu form of the verb. Connais-tu? Connais-tu la musique des Rolling Stones, par exemple? Okay, let's have a look what we've got here. So we've got some vous préférez. Vous préférez. This is useful because it's a little bit like the verb vouloir, or devoir, or savoir, or pouvoir. Kind of modal verbs. Verbs that can be followed by an infinitive verb. Okay, so here we've got vous préférez aller. Do you prefer to go That's what I mean by an infinitive verb, the whole unchanged verb with the ending er, ir, or re at the end. Do you prefer to go to see? Well, there's two infinitive verbs. Interesting. To go to see friends or to stay at your house. A couple of things need to change here. Three things, I think. Tu préfères. Just double check that, because sometimes in the written form you've got, especially with verbs like préférer, just double check the conjugation in the two form. I think you've got us préfère, got two slightly different sounds in the e. Oui, préfère. Okay, so if I'm not sure about like a written form of something, I go on to like wordreference.com or something similar to look at the conjugations of a verb. So what I did there was I just checked. Ici, par exemple, il y a un E aigu, accent aigu, one little accent that goes up like that. That makes it préférer, préférer. Here we've got one accent aigu, and then we've got an accent grave. So préfère, préfère, et an e. Et an e. Slightly different. Tu préfères, préfères, préfères. Tu préfères aller voir les amis ou rester chez... Now, this bit here. Chez vous. Chez vous doesn't make sense if you're talking to someone in the tu form, unless they live with someone else and it's like around your house. Chez vous means your place or your house. Chez vous instead would become chez toi. Chez moi is like my place. Chez toi, chez lui, chez elle, chez nous, chez vous, chez eux. Our place, your place, their place, etc. Okay? So if that looks a bit unfamiliar, drop me a comment and I'll explain. I'll put a link to something that explains these pronouns. So, pouvez-vous m'aider s'il vous plaît? So in this one, three things change. Can you help me, please? Okay, please. That's something that does actually have like an informal to form equivalent. Okay, so s'il vous plaît, you use that with someone that you're addressing formally, an individual, or you use it with a group. There's a singular to equivalent. You'll probably have heard it. If you haven't, don't worry. So pouvez-vous, that's pouvoir. That's the verb to be able to, can if you like. And this up here is préférer, to prefer. Great cognitive English, obviously. So pouvez-vous becomes peux-tu. Peux-tu m'aider s'il vous plaît? Excuse-moi. Pardon. Peux-tu m'aider s'il vous plaît? Can you help me? Instead of pouvez-vous. S'il vous plaît changes to s'il te plaît. S'il te plaît. You might see a little circumflex over the I in s'il te plaît, but you obviously won't hear that. S'il te plaît means if it pleases you. S'il vous plaît means if it pleases you in the vous form. So let's have a look. Préférez-vous du vin rouge ou du vin blanc? Okay, why have I put that in there? The reason I put that in there is to get that little du. Okay, du or de la, or variations of that means some. Often it means some. So, would you like some red wine or some white wine? Okay. Préférez-vous, préférez-vous as above becomes, oh actually up here we've got vous préférez, but here we've got préférez-vous. So that's just the subject, pronoun and verb inversion. Vous préférez becomes préférez-vous. They can both be questions. This one needs your intonation to go up at the end. This one just doesn't need anything because it already denotes a question. So, préfères-tu du vin rouge ou du vin blanc? Ça dépend. Pour moi, ça dépend de la saison. It depends on the season. For me, anyway. Pouvez-vous? So we had pouvez-vous. So that's again the verb préférer, that's pouvoir. Here we have the verb pouvoir again, to be able to. Are you able? Can you help me? Can you tell me where to find? That's what this is. So, peux-tu me dire où se trouve? Can you tell me? Can you tell me where can be found? Blah blah blah. For example, excusez-moi, pouvez-vous me dire où se trouve la bibliothèque? Oui. Oh, peux-tu me dire, s'il te plaît, où se trouve la gare? Yeah, can you tell me, please, where the station is? Okay, the last couple of ones. Let's see what we've got here. We've got, voudriez-vous m'accompagner? That's a nice one. Accompagner means to go with or to join. It's a really useful one. Do you want to come with me? Do you want to join me? Do you want to accompany me? It's a useful one. And we've got the little me, object pronoun before it, which means me. It's the same as me dire, tell to me. That's an indirect object pronoun there. Voudriez-vous would be voudrais-tu m'accompagner. So that there, if you look at that, that's from the verb vouloir, which means to want. If I go to, say, word reference now, and I type in vouloir, French conjugation, I will look down to where it says present conditional. Yeah, and I can see that I've spelled it correctly. V-O-U-D-R-A-I-S. Voudrais-tu? Would you like? Would you want to come with me? Okay. Voudriez is the vous form. So instead of voulez-vous, do you want? Voudriez is would you like? Voulez-vous, do you want? Voudriez-vous, do you or would you like? Veux-tu, do you want in the tu form, singular. Veux-tu? Veux-tu m'accompagner? Becomes, so instead of do you want, it's would you like to? Voudrais-tu m'accompagner? Okay, we've got the last one here, which is slightly different because it uses the verb plaire, which is to be pleasing to, which is the same verb you see here. S'il vous plaît, s'il te plaît, if it pleases you. That's the verb plaire, okay? And something in French please it is pleasing to someone, which basically means to like. If you please, can translate into English as to like. What am I looking for? What am I looking for? Okay, we'll just use the board. I'm looking for my monitor. That's what I'm looking for. Ah voilà. Okay, we'll have to get down a tiny bit. Allez, allez, allez. Cela vous plaît. Okay, so cela is like a more formal, longer version of ça. Ça. C with a cedilla and an A becomes ça, and that means this, that, or this thing. Okay. Cela vous plaît le vin. Cela vous plaît le vin. What you're saying there is, do you like it? Wine. This wine pleases you? This wine pleases you? Do you like this wine? Back translating it doesn't always help, but sometimes it does. So you can also say ça vous plaît. If you hear ça or cela, ça, they're the same thing more or less. So même chose. So here's some examples of things that you could put after it. So you could put ça vous plaît aller au théâtre. Do you like going to the cinema? Or the theatre, sorry. Ça vous plaît aller au théâtre? Ça vous plaît voyager? Do you like travelling? Do you like to travel? So you can use infinitive verbs there, plus whatever the thing is that follows. Going to the theatre would be aller au théâtre, go, to go. Do you like travelling would be, do you like to travel? Or you can use verb, infinitive verb phrases. Or you can use, with this verb, structure, little nouns, okay, singular nouns like le vin, le cricket, la musique, des Rolling Stones, par exemple, okay? So if you're going to change that to the to form, instead of cela vous plaît, you use cela te plaît. Just like in the change where you go from s'il vous plaît, if it pleases you, to s'il te plaît, instead of vous plaît. So, do you like wine, cricket, going to the theatre or travelling? Use with the verb plaire. I'll write that over here. P-L-A-I-R-E. Cela te plaît instead of cela vous plaît. I know that there's a heck of a lot in there. It's a long video. I've got a raspy throat. It's all a bit scribbly, but hopefully you can see some of the things, some of the ways that you ask questions. You can ask with just like making a statement and bringing your intonation up at the end, or you can ask a question just by inverting the verb and the subject pronoun. You might have picked up on like a few useful verbs that you actually need to go away and like practice the conjugations. You might have noticed the difference between the present tense of the verb like vouloir, voulez-vous, versus voudriez-vous. Do you want versus would you like? Conditional being a little bit more polite if you like. You may never have realised that s'il te plaît is the informal version of s'il vous plaît, for example. Both mean please, but you need to use s'il te plaît if you're addressing anyone in the to form and asking or saying please. Yeah, so those, and then you might not have recognised or not been able to remember, for example, some of the changes from the vous to the to form of verbs, like the verb venir. For example, d'où venez-vous? Where do you come from? D'où viens-tu? Okay? Or the verb être, to be. Maybe you know êtes-vous or vous êtes, but you just couldn't think of tu es. It's not a problem. Language is something that you can always improve on. Even if you've been studying it for years or even teaching it, you know, there's always room for improvement, which is so exciting. So that's how you change some questions from the vous form to the to form in French. And I hope you find it useful. Merci beaucoup et bonne semaine et à la prochaine fois. Au revoir.